Okay, this week Intel announced that it has a new range of CPUs coming. I mean, we've known this for quite some time. There is a follow-up to the 14th generation Core chips. We're now in the Ultra era. We have the Core Ultra 200S series of processors. Just a name that just rolls off the tongue there.
No, it doesn't. Stop. It's so bad.
And interesting stuff. Obviously, we've got a Core i9. We got a Core Ultra i9.
Ultra
No,
9.
it's not Ultra 9.
There's,
This is
yeah.
just really confusing me.
Yeah.
We've got prices. They range from $589 USD for the Ultra 9 285K, and yeah, I mean, just scales down to Ultra 7 265K 394. Now, the interesting thing here is that we're looking at increased efficiency. We're looking at increases to performance in productivity applications, but the highlight has been on gaming, where Intel is basically flagging that this isn't going to be running that much faster, all told, versus the existing 14900K, but it will be offering interesting efficiency improvements. It's also saying that it's going to be lagging behind the X3D series of chips from AMD, and there's talk of like 5% differentials there. I'll be interested to see whether those figures hold up, because it seems somewhat implausible based on our current benchmarks. Alex, it's not really a great time for gamers in the CPU space at the moment. I guess on the one hand, we do already have extremely performant chips that are by and large double the performance or more than consoles. But it looks like the priorities of Intel and AMD are not really with gamers this generation,
They
and the
aren't.
gains are minimal.
And I'm curious to see what can be done about it in the coming future, because AMD's kind of snaking around issues in a smart way was adding the X3D chips there, which
Yeah.
is the normal chip with just a chunk of cache on it. And for all those games that use a lot of memory and go out to memory often, it was a great benefit. And you see it just annihilating Intel chips sometimes. And I think that's a great thing that they've done. Intel, on the other hand, has been, they've merged all their CPUs to be hybrid now. And I'm not exactly sure it is the winning method for gaming in the near future. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of games run worse with E-cores on. Intel has been coming up with methods and means to try and stop that. But it's not exactly successful with each and every release. Just John, you were playing Space Marine, right?
Yep.
And you had to turn off
Yep.
E-cores to get double the performance. And
Yep.
it's like, that's not a great place to be in,
Nope.
I would say. And I'm very happy to see them reducing power, which is a great concern, I would say, just for heat, especially, and stability of their chips, which died. I'm not exactly a big Intel fan at the moment, but if you can hear that. But I'm not exactly sure what the path forward is for gaming performance. I think they almost need like a gaming specific product, almost like the X3D, to really bring the competition out there. Maybe something that only is P cores, really focuses on gaming performance, maybe even ups cache, just like they do on the AMD side of things. And yeah, it's just a great product in that aspect, because I don't know who exactly this product will entice right now at this moment, especially now that AMD announced that there's going to be greater longevity to the AM5 platform, which, maybe there's going to be even more future X3D chips there. Maybe there'll be changes to like what levels of DDR5 it supports with future revisions of motherboards. Everything looks like it's going in AMD's direction, in spite of the fact that I'm happy that they've brought power down here. But it still isn't enough to make me say to someone, yeah, get an Intel chip,
You've got to be looking at this from a kind of more holistic perspective, which is I'm not just using this for gaming.
Yeah,
to kind of make this make sense. I mean, there has been talk of, I mean, they're talking about the power savings that you can make, and there's two responses I've got to that. Typically, gaming isn't CPU limited and shouldn't be CPU limited, so it won't be running flat out anyway. It will just be spiking when you are, occasionally CPU limited. That's the sort of ideal scenario. So the actual power savings there, it's not as if you're going to be getting like, well, gigantic power savings throughout the entire experience, I don't think. Secondly, again, this is the thing about the X3D chips. I mean, we've been looking at improving our benchmarks recently, and our benchmarks are including power measurements. The X3D chips are already like extremely power efficient, and it turns out the reason why is that accessing memory is a hugely power intensive task. And if you're not actually leaving the chip, if you're just using the cache there, it's a lot more efficient anyway. So yeah, when we were looking at the X3D parts, we were surprised at how low the power consumption actually is. And it turns out that that's the reason. So there's a lot of good reasons for actually going down the X3D route as a gamer. Now, in terms of productivity and using your PC for other things, we've yet to see what AMD is coming up with for X3D on like the 16 core parts.
Right.
Going to be very curious. I mean, there's been rumors that they're actually going to double up on the cache to actually add a chiplet and a cache for each cache per chiplet, so to speak, whereas it was just one cache on one CCD for the 7000 series. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Intel finds itself in a bit of a weird position here. There's also rumors, I don't know how true they are, that certainly Arrow Lake S demands a new socket, which means a new board. Is that going to persist for the following generation? This is like a crucial thing because AMD is just hitting it out of the park by having a platform that lasts for years, like multiple generations. There's a lot going on here. Now, there's some great stuff happening at Intel, but, this is a classic example of how long it actually takes to turn things around. When you've got strong competition, you can't suddenly, trash your architecture and just come up with new products. These things take like years to develop. So I'm really going to be interested to see how this all plans out. So, Alex, what do you make of all of this?
Well, you were just talking about productivity as well there too, and maybe AMD's the one lagging feature of using an X3D chip is just less core speed, as well as usually the chip, if you're not getting one of those half like 7950 X3D, you're having less core count in general. You're paying a lot more. But in the future, that might not be the case. There are rumors, I believe, of X3D being on both halves of the next releases, like both CCDs, CCO?
CCDs? I think they're CCDs at this point.
Yeah. Which would be it would be like having your pie and eating it too, as they say. It'd be so good, right? And I know a lot of people who just game on their PCs. We use PCs for productivity, but not everyone does. And I think capturing the core gamer market isn't really talking about how great it is to render things out from Premiere for people, unfortunately, and which is where Intel has kind of been doing better.
Yep.
So yeah, I really would love to see just a general. I know they're trying to unify stuff by putting these E-cores and everything, but man, games have just like so rarely been better with E-cores. So rarely. And
more like L-cores, am I right?
Yeah, like it has been a loss so many times. I think when I did have the 12900K, I covered definitely probably, these are from my ass statistics here, but like 9 out of 10 times probably turning off the E-cores would do nothing and lead to a better experience. So, which is a shame because obviously you have these powerful CPUs, more powerful than the console CPUs in your PC, but devs just don't take advantage of them for anything reasonable. Games are not as wide as we would like them to be. So yeah, I think we need something different there at Intel from the CPU space in the coming to near future. Otherwise, there's not a great, other than maybe price performance for the mid-range parts, a good reason. And almost like AMD giving up on the RTX 4090, like competition like that. We talked about this about 2 weeks ago where AMD, that one gentleman from AMD said, we really shouldn't be focusing on competing on the ultra high end. Instead, we're going to focus on a market we can capture and one that it has like a large install base. And Intel not competing really greatly directly with X3D in spite of what these slides, which I don't really fully believe. Once again, having that performance crown is really important for mindshare, and not competing there, it's not great.
So John, you're on a 12900K.
Yeah, I am.
You do use your PC for both gaming and productivity.
Indeed.
I mean, the efficiency side of this must be compelling to you because you keep complaining about how hot your PC is.
Oh, 100%. I like this. I do think the efficiency stuff is actually good for those sorts of scenarios, but in theory, I would just like it to work better in terms of like game side of stuff when possible. And I guess like that, like you said, Alex, 9 times out of 10, turning off E-cores doesn't usually actually do anything negative or positive, right? But there are occasionally issues there. And I guess in that case, it's more like pointing finger at the software makers rather than the hardware itself. And that's fundamentally where a lot of the E-core stuff becomes a problem when it's not managed correctly on the software side, and you end up with situations like that. But yeah, we are at this point though where like, I mean, heat management and power draw does start to matter more, I guess, just because modern PCs demand a lot of power, especially if you couple that with a high-end graphics card. You're pulling down so much energy through your power lines there. It's not that cheap to run. And obviously that also produces additional heat. And for processor-intensive tasks that we often see, that does massively boost the heat coming out of these PCs. But I would, man, I don't know what the solution here is. It's interesting the direction they're taking. I do think, like somebody mentioned, and it wouldn't necessarily help me, but having a CPU line that specifically is designed for games versus more general purpose makes sense. But I don't know if Intel wants to.
There have been rumors of a P-core only product from Intel called Bartlett Lake. Seems to be coming the second half of 2025. 12 P-cores is apparently the proposition there. What architecture it is, it could be interesting. But yeah, I'm going to be interested to see just how all of this testing pans out, because the X3Ds have done a number on AMD's 9000 lineup.
Yep.
And now we've got the 9000 X3Ds coming up. Just to cap off, we got this question from SJ33 in brackets Jake. Should we do it? 3, 2, 1. Hi Jake.
Hi Jake.
That works.
Hi all. Intel just announced Arrow Lake, and it's another CPU release with disappointing gaming performance. To be fair to Intel, I think it's fair enough that they've been honest about gaming performance from the start, unlike AMD with Zen 5. However, it does leave us in a position where the 5090 and potentially other upcoming GPUs will be CPU bottlenecked for a good few years. What does the team think about the current state of CPUs and both vendors struggling to meaningfully increase gaming performance? A Snapdragon missing their chance to capitalize. I don't know if ARM's going to be the answer at all there. But Jake is quite right in that there's a lot of scenarios now where you're basically CPU bottlenecked on a 4090 or even a 4080 or even lower. So that is a bit of a problem. But I do think, I don't know what you think about this, Alex, but it does seem to be a problem that NVIDIA is aware of, which is kind of why we got frame generation, one of the reasons we got frame generation in the first place. So the obvious solution is kind of more frame generation, assuming it works.
I don't know. It's so weird where like John just mentioned earlier, like there's obviously a large software issue going on now where, let's be honest, a 7800 X3D should not be actually almost ever bottlenecking a 4090 within reason. Like we're talking about chips, not the 7800X3D, but like go to the Intel side or even the non-X3D parts from AMD. We're talking about like 5 gigahertz and more, like for single core speeds. Like, do we know what's even going on anymore in these games? Like the fact that you can be CPU bottlenecked with the ridiculous advances in CPUs ever since the 90s is it's almost, actually, it confuses me, especially since now GPUs have taken up so much more of the task of the frame, like over time. They, hardware TNL, then you go to compute shaders afterward, and now you're going to have like obviously mesh shaders too, like all the fine grained culling. You're not going to need as much coarser culling on the CPU side necessarily in the future as well. There's a lot of stuff where I'm always like, man, why are we CPU limited? And it comes back to us having software that isn't really taking advantage of the multi-core aspects of our CPUs very well, and or spending cycles in a way that isn't so great. And you see that with all the games that are stuttering like crazy on PC. And Jake is very right. I think an RTX 5090 and any of the chips between it and the RTX 5080, and if they come into existence, are going to be very CPU limited in many games, even at 4K. And I don't think that's a great position to be in as a market. It's also, it just totally takes the utility out of these cards unless a game has path tracing sometimes, which is a bit sad. I don't think the answer is more frame gen, because I would rather the software side of things be solved rather than leaning on, quote unquote fake frames to solve the issue. I'd rather it be like the Doom Eternal style. This game can run at 500 FPS because we scale really well on the CPU. I'd really rather more games be like that, but now that takes a lot of move from both the IHVs and things like Unity and Unreal to make sure that the games, so that make sure that these engines actually take advantage of multi-core CPUs and don't waste cycles doing stupid stuff. I'm sorry. It's just like, it's like, I've been slightly broken by releases sometimes.
Alex, to be fair, like a lot of the engineers I've spoken to over the past few years, they all express this feeling that software itself is getting far slower and more inefficient than ever. Like there's just so many inefficiencies inherent to software these days, whether it's the OS level, programs like Premiere, as we know. Like there's just so many inefficiencies buried in there that's just like requiring so much more hardware to push through than it realistically should. And that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, you get that feeling sometimes in games to a certain degree, but I definitely feel it in Windows and in Premiere and all these other kind of things, just across the web as well too. So I think there needs to be some sort of change in software paradigm, whether, I don't know, APIs also need to get better, because DX12 has not been the solver for CPU related issues, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how this goes, because if you think about what AMD did with X3D, I mean, the thinking behind X3D is kind of not really great. They're seeing that a lot of games are not, are moving out of cache memory into system memory, causing a lot of lag. The solution there is just to throw a big bunch of silicon at the problem with a massive cache, and that increases the performance, right? When in actuality, you would hope that games would actually be a bit more efficient than that and actually stay within cache more frequently.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of strange. I mean, what next? X4D?